moment, and Shahar will begin with an island and a Judge's Familiar for round number 3.
Two-time Pro Tour champion, Judge's Familiar.
I don't know if that pains me to say or if it's just
Get
real.
it right, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult the bird. It's on its way out soon.
It is.
From rotation, but I guess it did some pretty good work. I don't know if there's been a card that's like one more and has been mocked as much.
Almost certainly not. Like 2 Pro Tour wins is a pretty big game.
Like Hypnotic Siren came out and they're like, dude, we get to finally cut Judge's Familiar. It's like, no, dude.
No, I still have to play 4.
No, Judge's Familiar is actually like kind of good. Jimmie's going to play another Temple here, so he's off to a pretty slow start. We'll see if maybe he has the Thoughtseize, but he just has to pass the turn back. So Shahar is doing what Mono Blue does very well, which is just curving out.
Yeah, just playing like these kind of mediocre creatures, right? But just adding to his devotion count and eventually building towards something. If he draws like a Thassa or a Master of Waves, like one of his heavy hitters, or even like a Biden of Thassa would be very good right now. And Shahar has 2 of those in his main deck.
Tidebinder Mage, pre-combat, Frostmourne pumps, along with the Judge's Familiar, going to get in for 3 points of damage. Lorenz down to 16, but he's already underneath the gun here. And he needs to play some sort of removal spell now to maybe catch back up, but Judge's Familiar can kind of put a foil in that. So
yeah, it is kind of rough when your first 2 lands are temples. A little slow out of the gates, and the Mono Blue deck really doesn't need much, you know? Like, it does have flashy wins where you could draw, like, your One of Nykthos, Overload a Cyclonic Rift, but, like, a lot of the games just play out like this, where you're just beating down with, you know, these random creatures.
A pump of the weird here. Shahar going to pump yet again. So it's going to be an attack here for 6 if Jimmie has nothing.
Yeah,
and he does have nothing.
And I like what Shahar is doing, where he is spending his mana on pumping a Frostburn Weird rather than deploying, like, the 3rd one in his hand. You know, he simply could have played 2 weirds that turn. But he's getting in the damage while he can and just like pacing himself pretty well and not setting himself up to potentially lose to like a Bile Blight if he wants to pump like multiple Frostburn Weirds on the next turn.
My tip for Jimmie this turn would be to play a spell. There we go.
Yeah, so there's a Desecration Demon, but Shahar already has several things in play, and it should be pretty easy for him to just keep that tap down. Or in this case, he drew a Cyclonic Rift. So,
that'll make it easy.
Yeah.
He can bounce that and then keep pressing his advantage if he'd like. He also has a Frostmourne in his hand that he could play. Maybe sack to the Demon if he wants to do something like that as well. We'll see how he does want to play it on this particular turn. He's pretty far ahead at this point, though.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of nice knowing that these Black Devotion decks don't have anything like a Damnation or a Mutilate or whatever. You are free to basically just commit everything.
So this turn is like kind of interesting, right? Because I think it's very easy to just say, yeah, just like riff this guy and then attack him. But there's also like the kind of information game with Mono Blue where it's like, do you want to give away the fact that you have a Cyclonic Rift in your deck?
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said for that, but it's also just like, is Jimmie really going to play around it? You know, does he have that kind of luxury? Or is it better to show it to him knowing that you only have 1 copy in your deck and maybe he'll play around too much?
Okay.
But I think it is just like also, you make the best play, you lock up this game that you were already pretty far ahead, you don't give him a chance to get back in it. And I think that is worth more than the information that might be gleaned from him knowing that he has a Cyclonic Rift.
5th land is a swamp for Lorenz, but he has not done much of anything. The only spell that he has cast this game is a Desecration Demon, and that got bounced back to his hand. He's going to pick up those 5 lands and concede the game. So Shenhar does win game number 1 here over Jimmie Lorenz. Mono Blue Devotion very quickly up a game over Black Blue Devotion.
Yeah, and again, we see things like, you know, like Tom Ross's match against Jared Betcher where he mulliganed to 5 and Shahar mulligans once. And that's kind of the fear against these Thoughtseize decks is like, oh man, you really don't want to mulligan and just get Thoughtseize, you know, then your hand is terrible. But it's like, if you have a solid curve, it doesn't really matter how many cards you have. Like the Black Devotion deck is kind of slow, especially when they have a bunch of temples. They're kind of slow out of the gates, and they might just end up dying with a bunch of cards in their hand that they didn't get the chance to cast. So that is probably one of the best ways to beat the Black Devotion decks is just go under them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened in that game. He didn't draw any of his payoff cards.
No.
He didn't draw Thassa, he didn't draw Master, and he just crushed him.
Yeah, but again, you don't necessarily need those, right? You know?
Sideboard time. We will take a look at Lorenz's first. I've got a Liliana Vest, an Erebos, God of the Dead, a Notion Thief, 2 copies of Far and Away, 3 Doomblades, 2 Drought and Sorrows, 2 Negates, and 3 copies of Duress. Doomblade, I think, is a very easy inclusion here. It does hit most of the cards. It does kind of stink that it doesn't hit Knifeveil Spectre.
Yes.
But you don't get everything that you want. The one card I do want to talk about here very quickly with you is Far and Away, and its applications here, assuming it has some.
Yeah, I'm not sure because Ideally, you want to fuse it, right?
Okay.
That's the goal, but that doesn't line up very well against Judge's Familiar, both in the fact that it's pretty easy for them to just sacrifice it to counter it, but also they have so many like kind of tiny, sort of ineffectual creatures that they don't mind sacrificing. There's nothing really that you want to bounce specifically, so I'm not sure if that is just like an extra removal spell that he wants to bring in, or if that's a card that he wants specifically against something like green-white aggro to like bounce an advent token, make them sack like a giant experiment one, like that type of thing. That seems like a pretty reasonable use for that card and a pretty good reason to have it in your deck, so I'm not sure if it comes in here or not.
2 matches in a row with Far and Away. After
Yeah.
not seeing it for like a year.
It's coming back.
I guess, with only a few weeks left in its shelf life in Standard. You've got Shahars in front of you. What do you see?
Yeah, I see 3 Domestication, 4 Gainsay, 2 Dissolve, 2 Jace, Architect of Thought, another Cyclonic Rift, a Dispel, and 2 Negates. And these blue decks are kind of weird because they have a pretty bad matchup against the blue-white control decks, so they have to sideboard in a lot of stuff to try and overcome that. The fact that their game 1 deficit is like pretty big. So you see stuff like Domestication, which is for creature decks, and I think that'll basically be the only card that Shahar brings in here. Everything else seems like it is mostly for control decks, just counterspells, planeswalkers, and ways to protect your threats, really. But Domestication is basically an all-star in this matchup. Like before, if you play against someone like Jared Betcher who has Night Veil Spectre, like domesticating that is huge because it adds 5 devotion, and then your Master Waves, if it sticks, just makes a million tokens.
Yep.
You know, not a literal million, but enough.
I mean, it feels like a million.
It is. It is enough to kill them for sure. So instead, you're basically just using it to, you know, take his Lifebane Zombie, take his Pack Rat, slow him down. The best way for the black Devotion deck to win this matchup is to get a clock while they're also disrupting you and killing your things that matter. So if they get a Pack Rat or a Demon or something like that that gets out of control, that is where the black deck wants to be, and Domestication kind of puts a stop to that.
All right, game number 2 here between Shenhar and Lorenz will be underway in just a moment. Again, Shahar was able to win on a mulligan of 6. And, I mean, just pressure, get underneath them before they do anything. And truthfully, Jimmie didn't do much of anything that game.
Yeah, he didn't. But, like, Shahar also used his mana very well, pumped those Frostburn Weirds, got in the damage when it mattered. And just when it seemed like Jimmie was going to be able to, like, start playing a bunch of spells to stabilize, you know, he was already too low, and all it took was 1 bounce spell for Shahar to kind of clinch that.
Lorenz, looks like he's going to keep his opening hand. Shenhar will as well. And game number 2 is underway. Temple Deceit will keep things rolling. Going to keep that card on top. Shenhar will draw a card. It's an island, and we're going to play a Cloudfront Raptor. Jimmie will draw a card. You see a couple Water Graves there, another Temple Deceit as well. So kind of a slow hand, a little bit painful too, as he does go down to 18 from the Water Grave, coming to play untapped.
Yeah, again, we do see another instance of the splash, you know, having a pretty noticeable effect, right? Like, you get the Scry on turn 1, which is pretty nice for these decks, but then it's never a good sign that you have to play a Ravnica Duel untapped on turn 2, because it's a sign that your hand doesn't have a lot of other lands that come into play untapped also. So
yeah, it's just not free.
It is not free whatsoever.
Shenhar going to decide what his second land will be. He does have a Mutavault as well as an island over there, so he's actually thinking quite a bit about this decision. And it's going to go with the island. See if he has a turn 2 play here or not. I mean, if he's thinking that long, he probably does. He's going to Rapid Hibernation this Pack Rat on the upkeep. Doesn't want to let that thing get out of hand. So a rat token will come into play. Or excuse me, a frog token will come into play, not a rat token. There it is. Maybe that should be your next token.
The frog token?
Yeah, you'd be very scary.
Eh.
You wouldn't get a lot of play because you're rotating out. But
Yeah, Cauldron still wins, I think.
okay.
Maybe there's some sweet tokens in cons.
Twitter knows. Maybe. You know if there are sweet tokens.
No, I would have to think about it.
Lorenz going to play a land and pass the turn back. Did just scry with the Temple of Deceit. So Shahar on his 3rd turn. Again, he does have a Mutable over there. There's also a Thassa there as well. Didn't need that last game, but it's certainly nice to have it this one. Now there's a Bile-Blight to take care of the Raptor. So this is the pacing that Jimmie wants.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you don't really want to be in Shahar's spot and like have to rapid a Pack Rat on turn 2 rather than play anything. Play a Thassa on turn 3 with effectively 0 other devotion, especially when your opponent plays a Desecration Demon on your basically empty board. You know, it's like you get to scry every upkeep, which is great. It sets you up for future turns, but what you really need is stuff right now.
Yeah. these are the games that I feel like Mono Blue loses in this matchup where, I mean, he got up to like a decent start with the Cloudfin Raptor and then, taking care of the pack rat, but he's super far behind and now he's got some serious catching up to do and he needs Lorenz not to have like removal spells basically.
Yeah.
Because he's got his clocks on the table now.
I would imagine since he used a Bile Blight on that Cloudfin Raptor that was an 0-1, I mean, like, that's certainly a reasonable play, but you also have to be worried about stuff like Master Waves. So I would expect that is not Jimmie's only removal spell. I don't think he would use it that early. So if you're Shahar, you got to be kind of scared at this position, you know?
Your next threat is like almost certainly going to die, it seems like, because there's a
Yeah.
Frostburn weird. And so maybe you put like a lot of pressure on your Master Waves to be good this game. You can see Shahar's hand. He does have Master. He has a backup copy of Thassa. Also has a Cyclonic Rift. So Lorenz is going to put Desecration Demon's trigger on the stack, and now he's going to come into the red zone with just that. 6 damage will come across. Shenhar's going to go down to 11. And this might be another demon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is exactly the spot you want to be for Jimmie.
Yeah, it's almost... I mean, this is the thing that's kind of scary about the black deck is like the closing speed. Because, I mean, its main threat is Desecration Demon in this particular game, and that's a 6/6 flyer.
Yeah. I mean, one of the common misconceptions is that this black deck has a lot of discard and removal spells, but it is not a control deck, you know? Like, the game that you want to play is very much this, where you get off to a fast start, kill their important stuff, and then you see Shahar trying to get back into the game with the Master Waves, and we'll see if it's good enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, everything could crumble down. I imagine the Master Wave is going to make, its elemental tokens. And now Thassa is on. And I think if you're Shahar, you have to just hope, okay, if my Master doesn't die, I can just sacrifice the elemental tokens to control these demons and be okay.
Right.
But, I mean, that's like a perfect world situation.
Yeah, and in this spot, you might be a little worried that your Master is going to die next turn. So, yeah, you're going to want to sacrifice one, get in the damage while you can, because maybe you don't have those elementals next turn.
That's exactly what he does do. He sacrifices an elemental token, attacks with Thassa for 5. Lorenz is going to go down to 13. He will draw a card now. You can see a Thoughtseize in his hand. He also has a Gray Merchant and the 5 lands to cast that. The question is, does he have a removal spell? And this is where we talked about with the Bile Blight.
Yeah.
He used that on an 0-1 Cloudfin Raptor. He's going to play a Gray Merchant right now. It'll be a drain and a gain for 6, but if he had that Bile Blight right now, this game is much easier.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I can definitely understand his position where he wants to keep Shahar's board to a minimum, make sure that Thassa doesn't get out of control, but you also have to be really worried about Master of Waves.
So Shenhar's going to untap, as he did sacrifice 2 more elemental tokens to slow down those Desecration Demons, as they're both lethal right now. Shahar will draw after scrying. In just a moment, want to make sure the game state is where it's supposed to be. That's exactly what our table spotter is doing. Everything looks like it's good to go as he draws a Mutavault for the turn. Already has 1 among his lands, and the other card there is a Thassa. So Mutavault is fine. The other Thassa, of course, doesn't do anything at this point. So he's got to work with what he's basically got on the board.
Yeah, so it looks like this turn might just be using Thassa's ability to make some things unblockable, get in some damage, hopefully tap some things down, tap those demons down with maybe your tokens, maybe a Mutavault, and then try and sneak in those last few points of damage while keeping those demons under control.
And he definitely has mana to use here. With the Mutavault, that's 6 mana. That gives him plenty of mana for Thassa activations and Frostmourne activations, but can he keep pushing through damage? I mean, one of the things here, Gray Merchant was pretty big that turn is because Jimmie gained 6 life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just when Shahar probably thought that he had a chance, like he had a reasonable life total buffer. He had just gotten in 5 points of damage last turn, but now the Gray Merchant just kind of, resets everything and makes everything that much more difficult for Shahar. And you got to be thinking like he really wants to find like another Master of Waves. He needs another, set of creatures to like keep tapping those demons down. And then he found a Mutavault, which is like some help, but doesn't quite get him there. So now he's in a pretty tough situation.
Now he's got to kind of pick and choose on what to attack with. These are probably the best attackers here, making the Thassa and the Master unblockable. So he gets through 7 that way, plus 2 in the air. That's going to be 9. That's going to put Lorenz down to 10. Can play the Mutavault and just pass the turn back with the intentions of sacrificing probably the 2 elemental tokens again.
Maybe. I think there's some merit to sacrificing Mutavaults as well, because you're not going to want to use the 2 mana effectively next turn to activate Mutavault and attack with it.
Okay. Lorenz draws a card for the turn. Again, we know he has Thoughtseize over there. Don't know if he has another Gray Merchant. I imagine if he did, he would have cast it by now.
Yeah, I mean, that would win the game.
Yeah.
So that would certainly be a good draw. Thoughtseize not doing too much, especially since last turn Shahar didn't really do anything except activate Thassa, so it's very unlikely that he has anything of relevance in his hand.
We don't have a great look at Lorenz's hand right now, so he does shuffle it back and forth very quickly. He's going to play a Temple of Deceit as his land. And that top card will go to the top or bottom in just a moment, but it doesn't matter for this particular turn as it does go to the bottom. And he's actually in some trouble here. Even though he got off to a fantastic start, the Master Wave's not dying really did allow him to catch up.
Yeah, it tied up his demons for enough turns.
Ooh, now here's a Lifebane zombie. Take a look at the card. It's a Thassa. That's not going anywhere. Now, of course, Lifebane zombie can chip away, but it might be a little bit too slow in this situation. Shenhar is going to sacrifice an elemental token to tap down that demon. He's going to have to sacrifice something else, of course, to stop the other demon. The question, I think, right now is what? And it will be the elemental token.
Yeah, it looks like an elemental, and then he has the Frostburn Weird to block the Frog Lizard, and then so maybe he takes 2 from Gray Merchant, but then he has 6 mana next turn to make his 3 ground creatures unblockable. That combined with the unblockable Cloudfin Raptor is 10 points of damage. So assuming that Jimmie has no resistance, everything works out perfectly for Shahar. So he did a lot of fantastic planning on his last turn to set this situation up.
Well, here's the attack with the 3/3 Frog Lizard and the Gray Merchant coming in. And I think we're going to see the block that you did just mention. We'll see if he wants to animate the Mutavault to maybe block, but I just don't think he needs to if everything is laid out the way that you just mentioned.
Yeah, there's not, I mean, you could certainly activate the Mutavault, double block the Frog Lizard, kind of like clear the board away, but at this point, the game is going to be over in the next couple of turns one way or the other, and I just feel like you have the kill here. It is very unlikely that Jimmie has anything just because your Master Waves live for so long.
You don't have to worry about ultimate price, Bile Blight, anything like that, because if he had those things, he would have killed the Master. Like, if he drew it this turn, he would have killed Master this turn.
Yeah,
presumably.
But he did play a Temple, right? And I don't think he played a land last turn.
Correct.
Yeah, because he went Demon, Demon, and then Gray Merchant don't play a land. So it's almost certainly true that he drew the Temple this turn.
Yep. And you have to imagine that's little information that Shahar picked up on.
Yeah. He is the world champion after all.
That is accurate. He will untap and scry now with Thassa. Again, the card in his hand, everybody knows, including Lorenz, is another copy of Thassa God of the Sea. That card's going to go to the bottom, so mystery card coming here for Shenhar.
It would be kind of great if Jimmie just held the land, right? Because like any removal spell here, or like if he had held the land for last turn, so he didn't actually draw it to disguise a removal spell. Because if he has any removal spell here, it's just brutal because it shuts off his Thassa too.
Yeah, it's a disaster. Looks like maybe we're going to cast a Domestication. That probably gets the job done all the same.
Yeah, and that's reasonable. I mean, you don't need to unblockable all of your creatures if Jimmie has no blockers anyway.
Yep.
So this way you kind of hedge against him potentially disguising a removal spell pretty well.
Also keeps your Thassa turned on.
Yep.
In case, like, Frostborn would bite the dust, you still have the necessary devotion to be able to keep attacking.
Yeah, so if Jimmie does have something this turn that would prevent him from dying, Shahar also is hedging against that by having ways to make it so he doesn't die on the next turn, and then he gets another attack step to potentially finish things off.
I don't know if him tapping on that blue mana matters in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it's still 10. So as long as Lorenz doesn't have a removal spell, he's still good to go. He could, of course, fire at Mutavault and make the attack be for 13, but it looks like everything is going to work out the way that Shenhar wants to. It's an attack for 10, an extension of the hand. Shahar Shenhar going to win this match over Jimmie Lorenz. 2-0. Mono Blue Devotion getting the job done over Black Splash Blue Devotion.
Yeah, and Jimmie had a fantastic draw that game, too.
I'm actually pretty surprised he lost that game.
Yeah.
I really am. But that goes back to the Bile Blight.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was very much like that game was all about the Master Waves and how much work it did.
Yep.